We were called Spaz Kitty.
Right.
Why? I don't know. But we had there were two female singers who were in their early 20s, and they were great. I mean, these women could really sing. And there were three boys, us, who were all in our 30s. So you might figure out why it is that the band broke up after about a year and a half.
Hi, and welcome to 5 Random Questions, the show with unexpected questions and unfiltered answers. I'm your host, Danny Brown, and each week I'll be asking my guests 5 questions created by a random question generator. The guest has no idea what the questions are, and neither do I, which means this could go either way. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into this week's episode. Today's guest is Evo Terra. Evo is an award-winning podcaster and member of the Podcast Hall of Fame, an author of both Podcasting for Dummies and Expert Podcasting Practices for Dummies, and he had the 40th podcast ever published way back in October 2004. He's been the host or co-host of over 20 different podcasts and has either consulted for, edited, or advised on over 1,000 podcasts, so a little bit more than me there. He runs a strategic podcast consultancy called Simpler Media, teaches podcasting at Arizona State University, and curates the best fiction podcast at The End, the only listener-focused directory for completed audio fiction. I feel I need to take a breather there, Evo. Welcome to 5 Random Questions, mate.
Well, thanks for having me, Danny, and excellent job doing a live read of that very long bio that I have written for myself. And I'm sorry, also, you said this is random questions. I thought it was random answers. I thought I was just supposed to throw something out, but I guess I'll figure it out as we go along.
No, I will ask the random questions, and then we will just talk about that question.
Got it. Let's do it.
We're all good. And like I say, it's whatever way it goes, we're in it together. Obviously, you're in the hot seat, so I've got a little bit of a leeway there, but it's all good.
Understood.
We'd been speaking in the green room briefly before coming on the recording here, Evo. We've chatted before on a previous show of mine, way back when, and I'm curious, are you still following the beer diet or even the beer and sausage diet with Dr. Simpson, Terry the Dr. Simpson?
Yeah. So no, I have not done that. That was a whole lot of fun to do the beer diet. I did that, 3 years running, I think, every October, nothing but beer and sausage were my entire caloric intake for the month. And that was a blast. Terry and I are still very good friends. Actually, I still produce his podcast called Your Doctor's Orders. It was a fun experiment to do. A friend of mine here in town who still does it, which is crazy. I went to his birthday party a couple of weeks ago and his wife said, "I hate you because you are the one that he says, but Evo does it every time it comes around." So, but no, I'm out.
It's good enough for Evo. It's good enough for anybody. Right?
I like this plan.
I like it. And as I shared when introducing you there, you're a podcaster who's kind of on the other side of the fence now.
Yeah.
In that, obviously, you're on the production side, but you also curate the very popular audio fiction directory, The End. Mm-hmm. So for you, what makes a great audio fiction podcast?
That's a great question. I think everybody's going to have a different answer to what makes a great fiction podcast because, look, people like movies I don't like. People like TV shows I don't like. So I have to be very careful in putting too much of my bias into the directory that I run that you mentioned, The End. But for me, what I think is important for a show, what I like, what gets my own commentary on a show is when it sounds great and when it is performed great and it is a great script. I think those 3 elements need to be there. And if it can hit on those 3 marks and entertain me for, I don't know, half an hour to 16 hours or even longer. We have some shows listed which are pushing 200 hours worth of content. That's when it'll get my stamp of approval in the audio fiction space.
I was chatting to on one of the earlier episodes of this show. I was chatting to a giant over in the US who produces, edits audio fiction podcasts. Mm-hmm. And he was mentioning it took him about 60 hours just to create a 1-hour episode with all the tracks that you've got, all the, the narration, the research, all that. And I thought, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And to me, there's a huge range, right? You have those people that are spending 60 hours, just on the audio engineering piece, making sure that the soundscaping is right and balancing out and normalizing. I don't just mean that from a volume perspective, but from a sound level perspective, actors in disparate places around the country or the world actually that aren't recording together at the same time. So yeah, you have those which are very complicated, but then you also have the shows that are much, well, I don't want to say easier. That's the wrong word, but they're much more straightforward. Where it's one or two voices, where the soundscaping is very minimalized. They're not trying to make a cinematic audio experience, which some do, and those are great. I love those too. But I also like the straightforward, even just straight narrated stuff can be great as long as I'm and whoever the listener is entertained.
I hear you. Well, speaking of hopefully the listener being entertained, let's see how entertaining your answers are for the 5 random questions. We all good for this, Evo?
I'm ready.
Alrighty, let's bring up the random question generator. Okay, yeah, I think we're good for this to kick it off. Question number 1, Evo. If you could be any age, what age would you pick?
Well, the age that I am in my head is 27. I have been 27 probably since I was 27, I guess. And I don't have a real good reason for why. There wasn't something that happened to me at 27 years of age that was like a stellar moment. It's just, I feel that's when I grew up. And much like as you and I, everybody grows up to a certain height, I think that was my height. I'm not saying I peaked at 27. That's not what I'm trying to say. But my brain says 27 is how old I am. And then I look in the mirror and realize that I'm 30 years past that very soon. But yeah, I like 27.
And you'd mentioned there's not anything that kind of sticks out, because we're the same age, I feel. You just mentioned that was 30 years ago. I turned 57 this October. So I believe I feel we're probably on the same age there.
Pretty close. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, 27, that would have been, what would that have been? 1996?
96? No.
6? My math, I can't do math.
I can't do math in my head that fast. I said the late 90s, yeah. So So I mean, in the 90s, I was living in Los Angeles, which was great to be in LA during the 90s because, the alt music scene, the alternative music scene in LA was pretty amazing. I'm originally from a farm in the middle of the country. But I never wanted to be a farm boy at all. Big city life was always what I wanted. And we did that, in 92, I think we moved to LA. And then in 97, we moved to Phoenix, where I live currently. But yeah, it was just, I was young. I had a good job. We were doing things. It was exciting. So yeah, 27. And again, like I said, it's just kind of locked in my brain. I continue to say that that's how old I am until I'm reminded by my 57-year-old bones that that's not the truth. That's not the case anymore.
I hear you on that. Everything hurts in the morning when you wake up at 57. Everything, even if you've done nothing before.
Well, I tell you, the trick to that is, I mean, my wife and I, she's only a year younger. We have a personal trainer that comes to our house and works us out 3 days a week to keep a lot of that aging stuff at bay, or at least the detrimental effects, I guess, if you will, making sure we can still do things like bend our knees completely and walk for a long time. So hopefully we can keep that going as long as we can so that we can maintain our youthful vigor, I guess.
Yeah, and we were speaking in the green room before the recording. You mentioned currently in Arizona it's high 30s temperature-wise. So I'm guessing it really helps to keep a good level of healthy fitness for these kind of temperatures as you advance in years as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, heat affects us all more as we get older. And look, I live in Phoenix, as you mentioned, which everybody knows is a miserable place to live for about 6 months out of the year, and they're not wrong about that. And we tend to vacation in spots, like Belize. We're actually looking to buy some property down there. That's also very hot. That's Central America. But I prefer the heat to the cold. There are these weird people that live in places like Canada or are from Scotland and, very, very cold and damp places. And my body just says, I'd rather be hot outside than cold outside. I can make it cool inside or jump in a pool and I'm fine.
Yeah, that's fair. I was going to say it's easier to warm up than cool down. But like you say, if you're indoors, you got AC, you got a pool or something, you can cool down that way, right? So yeah, that's fair enough. And I have no idea who you're on about, Scots people living in Canada. No idea about. All right, so there we go. If you want to remain on Evo's good side, if you meet him, just call, hey, you look great for 27. I think
That's
we'll all be good
fantastic.
there. Perfect. All right, let's have a look then at question number 2. I like this. I always like musical kind of questions, and especially with your background, you just mentioned there, Evo, like the indie scene. So, Evo, question number 2. What is your favorite song of all time?
So that's an unfair question. I always despise the question, say what is my one favorite thing, because I have lots of favorites. It all depends on my mood and what I want to listen to on any given day. So and I my the crazy weird eclectic music tracks that we have in this house that I've collected over the years, and all these playlists are put together, some pretty avant-garde stuff. There's very few musical genres I don't care for, but I certainly do gravitate to certain. So I think the way I'm going to answer this question is change around and talk about favorite songs, multiple of those things, kind of depending on the years. So I am a big fan of a song by the Rolling Stones, "Sympathy for the Devil."
Hmm.
One of my all-time favorite songs. I just love it. It's very, very fantastic. That's from like the early '60s, is when that song came out. There's another song from the '70s, which I think everybody everybody my age has probably heard, although they probably don't know the name of it, and it's called "Pink Moon." And it's just this nice little guitar person singing from the '70s, "Pink Moon," and it's just a great, fun little song without much, I guess, many stakes in the song. It's not one of those things you want to go dancing to. It's just more of a mellow, chill out type song. I was a kid of the '80s, and so pick an '80s song. I'm probably a fan of that. We still see a lot of the bands when they're still touring and coming around, because that's always fun. Yeah, but then when it comes to the '90s, as I think again back to why 27 works for me. '90s music is not the music I grew up with, but it's certainly the music I listened to the most over time. So things like Soundgarden, Foo Fighters, Presidents of the United States of America, Cake. There's so many great. Rage Against the Machine are some great tunes. But if I had to pick one, Danny, because you did ask a favorite song of all time, I'll pick a favorite song of this time. It's probably, it's going to be a Rage Against the Machine song. Probably, which one do I want to say is my favorite one right now? What makes me the most angry when I listen to Rage Against the Machine? Maybe Bulls on Parade. Maybe that one. So, yeah, great stuff.
And so you're a bit of a rebel then when it comes to, because the bands you lined off there. And I'm guessing maybe, did you get into the punk scene at all when you in the '70s on the US? Because I know it was like slightly different from the punk scene in the UK.
Yeah, it certainly was. And to a very slight degree. There weren't punks where I grew up in the little bitty tiny town in the middle of the country that I was in. But I was certainly aware of the punk scene. But yeah, I know you're the Black Flag and the other crazy stuff. What doesn't really rise up to mind now, ska punk. Big fan of ska punk. In fact, I was in a ska punk band in the late '90s, early 2000s. So yes, I love ska punk. That's great. Modern, today's current bands, even though we're sort of playing back then, like Green Day, for example, is a good example of that. But there are lots of other ones, especially from the UK. There's bands like the Slackers and the Pie Tasters, and just me and ska are tight as well.
I love that you're ringing off names that I sort of kind of grew up with back in the UK. It's like, this is what I love about this podcast, mate. I never knew that obviously about you, but it's always fun to get, an example like that. I go, oh yeah, I know these guys. So what was the name of your ska band then? Where do you take inspiration from?
We were called Spaz Kitty.
Right.
Why? I don't know. But we had there were two female singers who were in their early 20s, and they were great. I mean, these women could really, really sing. And there were three boys, us, who were all in our 30s. So you might figure out why it is that the band broke up after about a year and a half. And it was me playing bass. A friend of mine played on the drums, and then we had Gilbert, who was a guitar player. And we had about a year and a half. We recorded a couple different recording sessions, played out live here in Phoenix, 2 or 3 venues, So yeah, feeling pretty good about it. And my fingers are now lost. I've lost all of my chops completely. Playing again is like, how do these things work again?
Yeah, I could never pick up. I tried the guitar, as I feel every teen boy probably does, is try guitar because you want to impress girls or boys or whatever, whoever we want to impress. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't take the pain of trying to get my fingers hardened to be able to play strings.
That's one of the reason I switched to the bass guitar, because I also played guitar as a kid, and was terrible at it. And I picked up drums when I was in high school and was great at that. But I switched to bass guitar, and like, first off, there's a lot of room in between these strings for my fat fingers that I didn't know that I had. And maybe I don't. I just don't have that much individual dexterity and control to take the little strings. But yeah, playing bass was a much different experience on the guitar without no massive calluses required. Some calluses required, but certainly not to the level that most guitar players have to deal with.
Perfect. Well, I like that. And as I say, I found out something new about you today, which is always good to find out. Good stuff. So let's have a look then at question number 3. You kind of strike me as a studious person. So Evo, have you read anything good recently?
Yeah, I have. My wife, who is a lifelong educator, has started building a collection of banned books. So when places like Texas or other morons get in and say, oh, you shouldn't be reading these books in the classroom, my wife buys a hard copy of those, because we read most of our things electronically, right, through ebooks. But for these banned books, we are keeping a physical library. And for the first time in my life, for the people who are in probably Americans only had to read this, most children of my age, not children, but back then, we had to read kind of the same books that everybody read. It was just kind of a very, very common thing to do in the States. And one of the books that everybody else read, but I didn't, which is, again, very, very small town with different rules up there, was To Kill a Mockingbird from 1960, I think it was written, and it's about time in the American South in the 1930s, and very much, very racially charged book, which is why it got removed from all the schools, because anyhow. So that one I read, and I really wish I'd have read this in high school. But I also, at the same time, I can understand why high schoolers hate it, because it's not. Yeah, it's rough to get through, and you don't know that all of the boring part up front is actually key to the story that's going to unfold later. Nothing is, just like any good book, nothing is randomly placed in there. Everything has a purpose and a reason. And it was fun. It was fun to read that and kind of catch up on what I missed from, back again to the 40 years ago. I guess it wouldn't have been for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting to me when I see like governments banning books, whatever the government may be. And there was like a sort of meme, I guess, or it might be the Good Liars, actually, the comedians that are online. They've got their live shows like that, and they speak to people in states that have got banned books, right. So the libraries are taking books out, schools have, etc. And they're talking about, well, this is why the book's been banned, and then they share quotes from another book, which is the Bible. And it's like the stuff that the other books are being banned for. So it's kind of interesting to see that sort of dichotomy.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty insane. How we kind of go overboard on protecting the children, But regardless, yeah, banned books are a thing. You who knows? I mean, I would have thought we got rid of those in 1945 when we kicked out the Nazis, but apparently that's not the case. We continue to do the banned books.
And To Kill a Mockingbird, that was the movie version. That's the Gregory Peck movie, correct?
Yep, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what's funny, because I watched the movie, but it was a long, long time ago. The book and the movie are very different. Because in the movie version, it's very much centered on the trial. But in the book version, it's not. It's centered on the kids who are his children, that Atticus's children, or what the focus of the book is about. And they do talk about the trial, and it is certainly an important part. It is the most important part of the book, but told from the eyes of the kids. And the experiences that they had, which is quite different than what we saw in the movie, but still highly recommend it.
I've never read that. It's like it was one of these books that kind of floated about at high school when I was in the UK. But I was into history then, so I was like learning about World War One, World War Two, Europe, conflicts, etc. But yeah, I mean, I didn't know like the book was from his kid's point of view, so I'm definitely going to check that out because I really enjoyed the movie.
I mean, it's not a long read either. I mean, I don't know what the word count is, but it is if it's 60,000 words, I'd be surprised, which is the standard length for a novel. I'd be surprised if it's even that long. I think I read it in like 4 days. So it's definitely something worth picking up.
I will check that out. I'm going through a bit of a book reading phase. I got into Elmore Leonard recently, primarily from the Justified TV series on Prime, I think it is.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was such tight writing. And the actors like Walter Goggins and
Walter Goggins is my hero.
Tim Oliphant, like just these two relationships was amazing. And the more I read into the background of the books that the series is based on, the more I realized I really want to read this guy. So I started reading him, and it's so tight. It's like you say, it's just when someone draws you into a book and you forget about everything else. That's gold.
Yeah, that's what I want. That's why I almost exclusively read fiction, because today I exclusively read fiction. I didn't for the longest time, but now I do because it's great for an escape. And exactly when a book is tightly written and really captures my attention, I just disappear into it, and it's pretty fantastic.
Now, did you get into, because obviously just as like a sort of side, you're heavily into audio fiction podcasts. Audio fiction podcasts. Fiction podcasts. Did that come before getting into the fiction reading, or vice versa, or in reverse?
Oh, no. I've been a voracious fiction reader since I was a baby. Well, baby is maybe a little bit long, but I was reading Dragon Riders of Pern and all the fantasy stuff I could get my hands on when I was in middle school and high school. Switched to reading more hard science fiction-y stuff, as well as a lot of other books on politics and the environment and science-based and skeptic books through my 20s, or to my 30s. But in my 40s, I really focused in back on the fiction books, a lot of things that are just fantastic and out there, because there's such a wide range of it. The audio fiction side, fiction podcasting specifically out of audio fiction, has been a part of my life almost since the beginning of podcasting. The first podcast I ever did way back in 2004 was a science fiction show where we interviewed authors. So every week, my partner and I would get, dozens of books in the mail from all of the publishers, because this was before Amazon sold ebooks. There were no ebooks back in the day. they weren't a thing. Everything was a physical copy of a book. And so we had all these books coming in, and I would, go through and find the ones that I really enjoyed and read them and as fast as I could. And though what happened from there is in 2005, a couple of the authors I had made friends with, I had told them about this thing called podcasting back in 2004 when I first discovered it. And 3 different people who are still friends of mine today called me or emailed me in the same week saying, I got an idea. What if I were to read a chapter of my audiobook and release that as an episode? And then the next week I'll read another one, and then go on and so on and so on. So I said, that's brilliant. And again, 3 different people came to me the same week to say this. So I helped them get started. I ran all the technical stuff. I said, you guys are responsible for recording yourself. Here are the tech specifications I want you to meet. But when it comes to the actual podcasting piece, which you find so complicated, I will do. Well, that was 2004. It was kind of complicated to be fair. So I would take care of all the technology, and that turned into, I helped 700 books get out there through, we called them Podiobooks, a blending of podcasting and audiobooks. We had a website, podiobooks.com at the time. So that really solidified me because I was listening to a lot of those things. So now that I'm running The End and curating audio fiction that's reached a season finale or the entire series conclusion, I listen to even more. I mean, I listen, every lunch. I listen, if I'm going out to like pick up the trash or things like that. That's a listening time for me because there's so much content. There's so much content out there.
It's always interesting that I don't see more authors release their books as podcasts. I know they have their audio version on Audible, for example, but to do it just a podcast, like say, do a chapter as each episode and have a bit more control over the distribution, any revenue that comes in, etc.
Yeah. And the reason I think that they did that at the beginning was because there were no ebooks. You wrote a book, you had that book hopefully edited by someone, and you're ready to publish it. But back in the day, there wasn't an Amazon Kindle. There was no ACX. There wasn't any of that. So in order to get your book read by people, you had to be picked up by one of the big publishers. And that's a fraction of a percent of the authors that submit their stuff ever get picked up. So that was why putting it in a podcast form was great back then, because it was, almost the only way to really get your story out there, unless you wanted to send a whole bunch of PDFs. But look, reading PDFs on your computer screen sucks. Nobody wants to do that. That's a horrible experience. So yeah, that's why they turned to podcasting. But, just a few years later, Amazon puts up their Kindle store. And now, in fact, just from 2010 onwards, an author can write The End and then hit export to Amazon and it's done and it's up there. So there are now distribution methods that did not exist previously that are a whole heck of a lot easier, Danny, than going in and narrating yourself, because you and I know this, but it takes some time before you're any good at reading your own words and editing stumbles and all of that kind of fun stuff. So it was just a bridge too far. Some people still do it. There are still plenty of authors that still release their books for free as an audio version that they themselves are narrating, but most people aren't doing that any longer.
No, that makes sense. They always say like a great, I don't know, there's like an analogy there somewhere that's like you can be a great author, as you say, but not a great podcaster. You can be a great speaker, but not a great podcaster or whatever. So yeah, I hear you on that. That makes complete sense, mate.
Do you love being surprised by an interesting story from an unlikely source? So do we at the Baggage Podcast, where four friends, a doctor, a prosecutor, a comedian, and a writer, interview ordinary people about their extraordinary experiences. There's the Vietnam vet recounting his war stories from 50 plus years ago, or the COVID virologist trying to do her job at the height of the pandemic. There's also the comedian who had a fatal asthma attack during a show. That's right, I said fatal. We've had these and many other fascinating guests and continue to find more all the time. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, check us out. Search for Baggage wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey there, Danny here. This podcast will forever be free to listen to. But if you enjoy 5 Random Questions and get value from the show and want to support it, you can do that with a donation of your choosing over at 5randomquestions.com/support. And thanks so much for supporting the show. Now, back to this week's episode. Well, speaking of making complete sense, and that was a terrible segue, but it's time to have a look at question number 4. Okay. Question number 4, Evo. If you could try out any job for 1 week, what job would you choose to try?
I think you're picking these questions specifically to me. I don't think they're all that
now,
random.
Come on now. I'm random and you can see my screen.
Sure. Yeah, I can see the video that you're playing. No, kidding. I don't want to be conspiracy theorists. We have way too many of them in this country as it is. So it's interesting this question comes up because I have been, this is going to sound crazy, but when my lovely wife and I are heading to Belize in just a couple of weeks, one of the things that we are doing is looking for a place to buy. And we are thinking about buying a place that has upstairs would be the house and downstairs would be a bar, just a little beer bar. Here's the challenge, Danny. I've never been a bartender. I've never ran a bar. My entire experience of working in a restaurant was being a busboy when I was 18 years old. I certainly have been to many beer bars in my life. I do that quite a bit, but I don't know how. I mean, this is going to sound terrible, but I'm not sure I can pour a proper pint. I mean, I just have. I mean, I open up a can or a bottle of beer and pour it in my pint glass here at the house. But I mean, the number of times I've pulled from a keg or from a tap is, I don't know, 3 in my entire life. So I don't know those skills. So there is a local craft beer place just down the street from us that has just recently switched owners, and we have become friends with the new owners as well as we are friends with the old owners. Because why would you not be friends with the people who are serving you drinks? It will always work out in your benefit. So I was asking them, can I come in and like intern just for like a week? Exactly what I was thinking of doing. Can I just work here and you teach me how to do things like pour a pint and how many glasses we go through on a certain hour and all those various ins and outs. So I'm going to say, I'll say bartending, but what I mean specifically by that is pouring beer in a tap room.
It's funny you mentioned craft. I'm a huge craft beer lover. And one thing I learned about pouring beer, funnily enough, at least craft beer, and maybe even macro beer, who knows. But you want to like pour it hard and follow the head up. So that, you want a big head and let it settle, right? Because that gets rid of all the gases and stuff that can be in there. And it doesn't leave you with like a bloated stomach or a gassy stomach or something.
Get some of the CO2 out, obviously, so it has a foam action, And, every different types of beer take a different kind of pour and also, preferably, a different kind of glass. And then there are the nitros, which is a wholly new ball game of how you have to do that. I mean, the good news for me is if we do follow through with this insane plan to open up a beer bar in Belize, it's not going to be a craft beer place because there really isn't a craft beer scene in there. So it will be, there's basically one beer in Belize. And so I will have that one. And then probably a whole bunch of rum because the rum is popular there as well and made it in-house. But I won't have to worry about the complexities of the craft beer scene. Like, should this be in a tulip? Should this be in, whatever those glasses are called? Nah, it'll probably just be whatever I can buy at the local shop. And that's going to be good enough for everybody.
Yeah, and so you'll just be opening it up for, will that be holidaymakers primarily, or locals, or what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. We're going to a new area of Belize that we've not been to previously. We've spent most of our time down in the beachy areas with just a little bit of time up in the mountains. But that's where the population lives. And the population doesn't live on the beach. The population lives other places. So we're going to be further inland up in the mountainous areas in the Cayo district. A little town called San Ignacio is going to be our base for there. We say little town. It's the 3rd biggest town in Belize. So it's actually a full population. So there are some expats that live there, not just American expats, but Canadian and English and from everywhere else, honestly, are in the town. So I think it'll be mostly locals, but I will not be at all surprised if most of those locals turn out to not be true Belizean locals, but are actually the more of the expat style. But we want to make it available for everyone.
Well, I'm sure, it's funny, Belize is one of these places I've wanted to go to because it's always sounded exotic to me. And the Belize I know of, and this could be totally wrong, totally bad stereotype, the Belize I know of is like a port of call for special forces. Generally, special forces that are planning something will go through Belize Airport. This could just be the movies that I've seen. I've probably seen one movie and it went through Belize or something. So I probably thought, oh, everybody must go through Belize for special forces.
I don't know if that's real or imaginary. I mean, I've never seen special forces in, but who knows? I suppose anything is possible. It was an ex-British colony, so who knows what deal they still have worked out. So who knows?
I will try put that on my itinerary then, mate. Let me know if you do that and then you open up the bar downstairs.
Yeah. I'll have to have you come taste it. Make sure I did a good job.
See how you poured it. Okay, well, we're doing really well here, Evo. We've got up to question number 5. And this is a nice, simple one, I feel, to ease the conversation out. So, Evo, question number 5. What is your favorite store in the mall?
the store that I want to go buy one thing at and then leave because I hate the mall. The mall is just a terrible, terrible place. Now, I should say in Phoenix, it's a little bit of a respite because, it's a cool place to go wander around. And we do that on occasion. But yeah, I don't really do. I mean, when I was a kid, obviously, the mall was the thing to do. Again, I was a kid in the 80s like you, and the mall was where all the cool stuff happened, according to the movies. But yeah, but nowadays, look, we go in and get one thing and we get out. I don't know if I had to pick a store that I frequent in the mall, I don't know, the Apple store. That's probably all I can think of.
Yeah, the malls are funny places. We never really, I mean, we did have malls in the UK. When I was, back in the 80s when I was like a teen, that would have been attracted to malls. But they were more kind of just like supermarket plazas. Whereas anytime I think of malls, I always think of, the John Hughes movies and the proper malls and the in the US, etc. But we never really had that in the UK. It might be different now. I've been away for almost 20 years now, mate. So could very well be different. I'm not sure.
I can tell you this. I mean, what I thought was a mall was all American based. And then when my wife and I lived abroad for the 3.5 years we did, we got to go to malls in other countries, and not Western countries, right? When we went to huge malls in China, in Thailand, and in Hong Kong. Oh my gosh, yeah, they're massive. There are malls that exist completely underground in a lot of these cities at the transit stations. Where two or more train lines get close to one another, build out an entire underground mall, which is really just how you get. Totally changed my opinion on what malls actually are. Like you, John Hughes movies, that mall is what I'm thinking of. But even now, the big malls here in Arizona, and Phoenix specifically, a lot of them are shutting down. We have a lot of big, empty, huge malls that just aren't frequented any longer by people. And I don't know why, but I'm no longer in the retail game, so I've no idea what the economic challenges there. But yeah, they have I shouldn't say most, but I can think of many that are now completely shut down and several other ones that are mostly abandoned, except for like one or two anchor tenants, and that's about it.
I wonder if the rise, you spoke about Kindle and ebooks, etc. earlier. I wonder if the rise of Amazon, I'm sure that's got to have had some impact on it.
Can't imagine it's done anything but that. Amazon's gotten larger. The Walmart that you might have went to when you were a kid is not the Walmart of today. They're all huge, massive super centers. Same thing for Target, the other big shopping centers. So we have these locations, and now with mail order, as you're talking about, order something online and it arrives in your house that day through that, the giant monster that is Amazon. That's changing things a lot. And also I think all the subscription box services that we have now, either for meals or clothing or housewares, there are just different ways of buying stuff today that we didn't have 40 years ago.
Yeah, there's an e-commerce platform. I can't remember which one it was, or which one it is. It's still around. It's very popular. I believe it's in India. I think it's a large Indian e-commerce. And the promise is if you buy something, it will be delivered to you within 90 minutes, no matter where you are. And it can be anything, a ridiculous thing that you'd maybe search for that's really remote. There's one in the world, and they'll still promise to have it to you within 90 minutes, which is crazy.
That's insane. I'm not sure exactly how they do it, but but that's the reality that we live in now. Everything has been, the timing has been shortened on things, so we need that instant gratification. So the idea of just wandering around, I'll wander around a bookstore, sure, I'll do that, but wandering from store to store to store, not really my bag.
Yeah, I hear you. My wife's friend, she has a little bookstore in the little village where she lives, a little independent bookstore, and she's doing really well. She uses social really well. She does author events, brings them in, has a little nook gathering where the author reads for a bit, has tea with the invited guests, etc. I'd love to go back to a lot more of that as opposed to like the big conglomerates of the retail world.
Yeah, we have a very, very small, very local shop just about a mile or so away from us, and that's where we buy our books from because I want to support Cindy. That's the owner. She's been connected with me for, I don't know, 2 decades now here in Phoenix area. So yeah, I think it's important that we shop local, and the pricing really, when you look at it, I mean, if you spend $1 more, is that really a big deal? Especially knowing you're helping out someone who's actually providing jobs in your community as opposed to one that's building giant data centers and taking away jobs, not to be pointed on that, but I'm talking about Amazon, in case somebody missed it.
In case somebody misses that. And we won't put that in the show notes. We won't put big Amazon links, etc. in the show notes for this time. But yeah, so Evo, we've reached the end of the 5 random questions there, and I really appreciate your answers there. As is only fair, I've had you on the hot seat there for about 35 minutes or so now. As is only fair, it's now time to hand the baton over to you for your question for me.
Yeah. All right. I've been thinking about this a lot today, Danny, to figure out which question I want to give to you. And because you are a Scotsman who is now living in Canada, haggis or poutine?
Ooh. Can I have Poutine topped haggis?
I mean, you probably can. I think everybody else is now vomiting in their mouths a little bit. But,
I know, right? That's actually a tough one, mate. I love haggis. A really well done, good haggis. It's cooked properly and it's got the proper size with the tatties and neeps, etc., and a little dram beside it to wash it down with. Can't beat it. And I went for my 50th. I went back to Scotland with my buddy. We did a sort of 10-day tour of the Highlands and Islands. So we did like a whiskey tour, then a sightseeing tour. And one of the distilleries we went to, I think it was probably Ardbeg, and they brought lunch out, and what they had was haggis topped mashed potatoes with whiskey strewn over it, which was like the weirdest concoction, but it was so good. But then you get a really good poutine if you go to Montreal. You have to go to Montreal. And it's just amazing. My wife loves poutine, and you're meant to say poutine, but I always say poutine. I'm bad. I've been here 20 years, still can't say it right. I'm going to say, I hate this. I'm going to say haggis, only for the reason, when done properly, the spices and that, you just don't get that with a poutine. But, who knows? Maybe I'll try open like a little specialty shop that just sells haggis-infused poutine, or vice versa.
I think that's a great idea. I've never had haggis. I have no idea what it's supposed to taste like. So good or bad, I have no idea. But yes, on the chips with brown gravy and curds, let's just call it that, since I can't pronounce poutine properly. Although that's how we say it in America. I like a good poutine when I've had one. Never had poutine in Canada, so I probably haven't had fantastic. I've had what I think is great poutine, but then again, I mean, it's French fries and gravy and cheese curds. How could it not be good?
And that's it. I mean, I think the secret is in the gravy. The curds and the fries and the chips, or whatever you want to call them. I call them chips. You should call them chips or fries, whatever you want to call them. They're pretty easy. Anybody can do that, right? But the gravy, whatever spices you put in the gravy, whatever herbs, etc., I think that's where the difference comes in. Yeah, and you can get crap poutine here in Canada. Oh, sure. I've had bad poutine. Then I've had some amazing poutine. So yeah, I think wherever you go, the gravy is the secret sauce, if you like, right?
I see what you did there. It literally is the secret in the sauce.
The secret in the sauce. Well, Evo, as I mentioned, I really enjoyed this episode, mate, and I learned a few new things, which is always a bonus when you have something like this. For anybody that wants to check out The End and your directory for fiction podcasts, want to know more about yourself, even reach out to you and ask, how can I do the beer and sausage diet? Where's the best place for them to connect with you online and just catch up with what you're doing, mate?
Yeah, if you go to evoterra.com, that's kind of the central hub for all of the things that I do. I'm changing that to evoterra.me because I'm not a company. I'm just a me, man. But of course, I'll still keep the .com and direct it in there. That will have links for all the things that I am doing in life. And if you want to check out The End, which is that book service or the audio fiction service that you mentioned there, Danny, that's at theend.fyi.
And that's really easy to remember. And if you love fiction and fiction podcasts especially, it's a great resource. So I'll make sure to leave notes to that. I will make sure to leave links to all that in the show notes. So whatever app you're listening to this on, or if you're listening to this on the website, just check out the show notes as normal and all the links will be there. So again, Evo, really appreciate you coming on 5 Random Questions, mate.
Thanks, Danny.
Thanks for listening to 5 Random Questions. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I'd love for you to leave a review on the app you're currently listening on, or over at 5randomquestions.com/review. And if you know someone that would enjoy the show as well, be sure to send them this way. It's very much appreciated. Until the next time, keep asking those questions.